Our next speaker, Akaki, is a researcher at Off-Chain Labs.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the presentation. Today, I will talk about TimeBoost, which is auctioning time advantage in first come, first serve. So motivation is that in first come, first serve transaction ordering policy, the arbitrage searchers spend a lot of resources on improving the latency, which leads to latency wars. And this expenditure is completely lost from the protocol perspective or the application's perspective. Also, there are too many reverted transactions because the transactions are in the private mempool, they are not observable. So searchers are trying probabilistically to backrun them, and most of them are reverted or failed. And also, last, it's a source of revenue to the Arbitrum DAO. So now let me describe what is TimeBoost exactly. So it's still first come, first serve transaction ordering policy, except there is one player who has 200 millisecond advantage over others. And this advantage for that player lasts for 1 minute. And the advantage on the implementation level is achieved by delaying all transactions of other users by 200 milliseconds. So you can imagine there are these two first come, first serve queues, one from regular users and one from time boosted user, and they are getting merged. Except the first one is delayed by 200 milliseconds. What is important that I have seen many times is that people think TimeBoost gives sequencing rights or block proposing rights. TimeBoost doesn't give such rights. It only gives 200 millisecond advantage in the first come, first serve ordering policy. And TimeBoost is auctioned. So the auction takes place every minute. It ends 15 seconds before the next minute starts, and the round winner is determined by this sealed bid second price auction. So sealed bid second price auction has this nice property of incentive compatibility. There is one reserve price, which is 1,000 of Ether. So if nobody wants to bid more than that, then TimeBoost is not given to anyone. And then we are reverting back to first come, first serve. So there is no delay. Just to give you some idea what numbers look like so far, the revenue stands at $2.8 million Ethers, and $4.1 million worth Ether is deposited in the auction contract. So there are 3 regular bidders, and 2 of them bid almost all the rounds, so all minutes, and one of them bids once in few minutes, let's say every 6 or 7 minutes. We wanted to measure how much value is for the TimeBoost owner. So we wrote this paper. So if you're interested in details, I recommend you to check this paper here, the title. So together with colleagues. So we looked into automated market makers that were deployed on Arbitrum, and how much arbitrage profits can be extracted with this 200 millisecond time advantage. And we looked into this sextex arbitrage in which there is external venue, so outside market, and there is IMM on the Arbitrum, and if there is a price difference, you can make money. So we made these standard assumptions from the literature that, let's say, the price impact for trading on the external venue is negligible, which doesn't necessarily hold, but let's say for simplicity. And the price discovery for the risky asset is happening on the outside market. So hopefully that changes at some point. Also, we ignore the noise traders on AMM. So let's say they don't exist. So AMM is only how much TVL is available there. The price doesn't move. Or in reality, of course, it moves, but we can assume that if they are noise traders, it moves in both directions with equal probability. And the risky asset, the price, external price follows this memoryless process. So price changes don't depend on previous minute or previous price changes. So we simulated the expected gains with these assumptions. So we took the historical real data from Binance last year, July, and we looked at all large pairs of assets of Ether and USDT and Ether and ARB, etc. So Bitcoin was also there. And we observed when we solved the optimal strategy that waiting till the end of the time advantage, so this 200 millisecond, once there is an arbitrage opportunity, is the optimal strategy. So that was the empirical observation. And the optimal strategy we calculated using this dynamic programming, where the state is how much time advanced in the 200 millisecond interval. So that's the advantage window. And we assume that if the arbitrager who has TimeBoost doesn't take the trade, then it will be taken by other users. So this is conservative assumption. So it gives a lower bound on the value. And we only looked at spot trading. So we also looked, so this minute performance in that month, July 2024. And we looked into 3 strategies. So always arbitrage is basically first come, first serve. As soon as you see arbitrage opportunity, you take it. And that was giving a mean profit of $5. So that was a pool of Ether and USDC. And max profit was $21,000. So there was 1 minute where arbitrager could make this amount if the pool size was $300 million, which was quite close to the real number. So arbitrage in equal intervals corresponds to basically priority Gauss auction model, where you can trade at the end of the block time. So we took the same 200 millisecond interval, and we see that mean profit is increasing, but max profit goes down. But if we now take TimeBoost and optimal arbitraging strategy, which says that you need to wait 200 millisecond, but once you see the arbitrage opportunity is there, so not trading in equal intervals, but waiting 200 millisecond once the event is triggered, and you can take arbitrage or make money. But of course, this includes LP fees in the calculation. That's how the arbitrage profits are actually defined. So you need to cross the threshold of paying fees and still have positive value. So max profit was $29,000. So there was 1 minute where you could make $29,000. So it's very high variance. We also looked at all other large pools. So the last number tells you LP fees. So 500 is 0.05% fee, and 3,000 is 0.3%. So as you can see, you are making with TimeBoost much more money if you pay less fees. And these are all the large pairs. We also looked into the option of letting the applications or smart contracts know about time-boosted transactions at the execution. So now you can access this data and find out all transactions which were time-boosted or not, but you cannot do it at the time of execution. So that is doable by introducing some precompile. But once we do that, it's interesting how AMMs react to this opportunity. So what they could do, of course, they can ignore and not execute time-boosted transactions. That's an option. But I think they can do something smarter, and that example of that thing they can do is to have different fee structure for time-boosted transactions. So not to make them pay flat fee, fixed fee, but try to capture more value from time-boosted transactions. So modify basically AMM slightly. And that is, for example, doable by these Uniswap v4 hooks. Okay, so they can do that, but then also time boosted parties can also react to that. And also one thing here is that they need to limit number of time advantaged, so time boosted transactions, one per time window, but that's only 200 milliseconds, so that's not a big restriction. Otherwise, arbitrager can send many transactions and get all the value or most of the value. So we solved the optimization problem, how much they should extract from the arbitrager, time-boosted party, where time-boosted party is smart not to move the price to the true price, because otherwise it's not getting any value. So it's moving the price somewhere in the middle between the AMM price and the real price, and that allows it to capture half of the value. So half of the value goes to time advantaged arbitrager, and if we assume that auction of time boost captures all the value arbitragers capture, then revenue will decrease by a factor of 2. Then quarter value goes to liquidity providers, and I think that's better than nothing, or better than fees plus nothing, because that's what they are getting now. And 1/4 of maximal extractable value stays unrealized, and it's not clear, at least in our model, who would get it. So another problem we looked into is similar to what Lioba was talking about. So there is this backrunning opportunities where noise traders move the price on decentralized exchange, and there is an opportunity to make arbitrage. And we try to compare time boost to first come, first serve, and right now we also try to understand what happens with priority gas auction. Okay, so we assume here that price, so it's the opposite of sex-tax arbitrage, in which we were assuming that price doesn't change on AMM. Here we assume that price doesn't change on the outside market, and all players have the same value for each opportunity. So the main assumption is that there is some latency to reach the sequencer. So once you submit transaction to sequencer, there is some latency. And that latency can also be interpreted as sum of 3 components, latency components. One is to, once the sequencer discloses the state of the chain, and it reaches to nodes who are listening to it, then nodes interpret that state and find that there is arbitrage value, and then they send transaction, and it needs to reach to sequencer. And this total value we assume is the same for all players who are playing this game. We also assume that backrunning opportunities come with some process. So example is Poisson process, but you can plug in different process. And we know that there is some distribution of the value. Okay, so now what are the players doing? Players can decide how frequently to send their transactions to sequencer, and we assume it to follow Poisson process. So the only thing that players decide is how frequently they submit transactions. So the only parameter of the Poisson process. And one justification of having Poisson process is that you are not giving any information to other players when will be your next transaction. Also, we need to have in this model the gas fees, so how much you pay for one transaction. Okay, so now we have one player, Alice, that has 200 millisecond advantage over all other players, and we call we have this other players, aggregate other player, Bob, which doesn't have time advantage, but it employs this probabilistic strategy of trying to steal backrunning opportunities. And then we can calculate what is Bob's expected utility. It will depend on how how many transactions it's submitting and what are the gas fees. So now Alice is faced with this following decision problem. Once it sees the opportunity, it can now react to it, which Bob cannot do. So Alice needs to decide to extract it or not to extract it. And it can calculate the probability of winning because we assume it knows what is Bob doing. So it can calculate also expected utility. And it turns out that if a value is large enough, Alice will try to extract it. And if value is low enough, then Alice doesn't extract it. Okay, so now Bob just needs to decide on his own frequency, or all the other players decide on the aggregate frequency. And if we assume some mild conditions on the distribution function, we have one optimal strategy for Bob on the frequency. So we can also complicate this a bit and allow Alice also have this probabilistic strategy. So Alice also tries her own Poisson process of sending transactions. And we can solve that game too, but it becomes a bit more complicated. But what is important is that if gas fees are large enough, then in the equilibrium, so there is equilibrium in which Alice doesn't even try that strategy. But if gas fees are small enough, we cannot exclude that Alice will also try it. So there will be some, let's say, spamming coming from Alice too, even though she is the time-boosted party. We also looked into first come, first serve setting where there is no such party. And if there are sufficiently many players, all the value will go into these gas fees. So in the reverted transactions that we can interpret as spam. So we took one particular distribution and estimated it from the data and saw that first come, first serve has 6 times more spam than time boost. And the intuition of that is that time boosted party takes high value arbitrages and only leaves a little bit on the table for other players. We are now, actually with researchers in Flashpost, try to model priority gas auctions. So here we have the same situation, except there are block times, and we only learn which backrunning opportunities survived the process at the end of the block time. So those that survive, they will be taken in the priority gas auction of the next block, but all the rest can be taken by these probabilistic backrunning strategies. And we have some initial insights that if the block times are long enough and gas fees are low enough, then in priority gas auctions, we will have very similar level of reverted transactions as in first come, first serve setting. And the intuition is that nothing will be left to be exploited at the end of the block in the equilibrium. And then we basically get this dynamics of first come, first serve. That's all from my side. Thank you.
So you have the 2 different players. I know the 2 different models, I guess the SECSTEX and more the backrunning one. What I'm wondering is, do you think it's the same person that's going to be doing though and then paying for the time boost advantage, or is it just going to be that either or sort of wins?
Yeah, I think it will be the same person, because in principle it's the same arbitrage opportunity. It doesn't matter where it came from. There is price difference that needs to be exploited.
Have you thought about measuring or estimating like a different metric? So this is kind of like the possible profit they could make in these models, right? Is there some proxy from what's actually happening on the chain that you could compare to maybe? I know a lot of it is kind of data we don't have because it's not on the blockchain, but is there something that might be close that you've run into?
But now there is data, right? So we can track the time-boosted transactions and see how much maybe they are making, or what is not available on chain.
Well, you can tell. Well, you can't tell how much they're, for example, like what price they're getting on a sex.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Yeah. So
So
in the first part, we were just taking the Binance best price and assuming there is no slippage there. But yeah, that's not. But on the other hand, that is conservative because they can have some other like better price or different utility function or different goal. So at least there is that. So there is this price difference that gives you value, but can be some other sources for the value too. So I would say this giving also lower and upper bounds on the value. But now with the time boosted transactions, maybe we can even infer what they are doing, like understand or compare it to this like Binance best price or centralized exchange best price and see that even so they are not making money in this SexDex arbitrage, but they still trade. So they must have some other utility function to get some idea about what they are doing.
cool. That makes sense. Thank you.